Hi, this is Dr. Kevin, your portable pastor with today's 5x5 Bible study on Revelation chapter 4, and we're answering your questions to our previous Bible study on chapter 4, but we're also answering your more general questions that you've submitted, and Natalie, one of our viewers, has that question. Does the Bible endorse slavery of black people? Now, Nat, the simple answer is no. However, it sounds as though there are other things that you're asking in that question, maybe your own situation, maybe about society in general today and the world today. So I'd like to go into God's character a bit more, who he is and how he wants us to treat others. Now for that, let's go back to an example of slavery that's pretty prominent in the Old Testament, back at the time when God's people were enslaved in Egypt. Now God freed his people from that enslavement. And once he did that, he gave them some laws, or what we call the Holiness Code as well. And the Holiness Code takes place in Leviticus, maybe the last half of the book. And in the Holiness Code, God says that I am holy. I, the Lord your God, am holy, and you need to be holy as I am holy. And in doing so, he says specifically in chapters 18 and 19 that in being holy and being separate and doing things differently, I don't want you to do what your slave masters in Egypt did to you. I don't want you to mistreat others like your slave masters in Egypt mistreated you. Furthermore, I'm sending you to a new home. I'm giving you a new homeland, and when you get there, there are going to be folks there who mistreat others and behave badly. I don't want you to behave badly and mistreat others as they would do also. So it's very important what God has given them from the very beginning, to be separate, to be holy, to not behave as the world behaves and everybody around them, but instead to love others as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. And we find that, first of all, in Leviticus chapter 19. But Jesus takes up that very same command and brings it over into the New Testament and the Gospels, where he gives us the two greatest commands, to love God and to love others. He repeats those commands a couple of times, or several times, in fact, throughout the Gospels. And one of those times is in Luke chapter 10, where he says to love God and to love others. And he says, let me give you an example of what loving others looks like. And he says, I'll do that in a story which we call the story of the Good Samaritan. Now, the story goes that there was a man who was attacked and injured, and his money was stolen from him. And it seems as though he was left on the side of the road between Jerusalem and Jericho, and was left for dead. And this guy was there in his community, and there are other people from his community that walked by that place, and they did not help him. Now, they might have been from the same religious group that this guy was. They might have been from the same social and economic class that this guy was in. They might have even had the same political affiliations. They probably fit all the same boxes into that same box as this guy, yet they walked to the other side of the road and they ignored the man who was injured, probably even about to die, and broke. Now, a bit later, a guy from Samaria came through on that road between Jerusalem and Jericho. And you have to understand, my friends, that Samaria is a very far place from this road to Jericho, between Jericho and Jerusalem. So this guy didn't fit those same boxes as the guy on the road. But he looked beyond all of that, even though this guy didn't fit into the same box he did. And he showed the guy compassion. He showed the guy mercy. Jesus said that this Good Samaritan showed compassion and mercy to the one who was injured on the side of the road. And furthermore, you and I ought to go forth and show that same sort of love, that same sort of compassion and mercy to others. Now, that's not the first time Jesus has instructed us to show love and mercy. But a few chapters earlier, in Luke chapter 6, he gives us the Beatitudes. And within the Beatitudes, he says to be merciful as your Father in heaven is merciful. How was God merciful to us? Well, we hated him. We hated his ways. Yet he still loved us, even though, we didn't want to tell the truth, or we wanted to steal, or we wanted to violate all of his laws, but he still loved us and sent us his son to set us free. He sent his son to set the captives free and to proclaim liberty to those of us who were enslaved to this world. And that's what he wants us to do, to show that same sort of love, that same sort of mercy to others. Specifically in Luke chapter 6, in that same paragraph, when Jesus says to be merciful as your Father in heaven was merciful, he says how loving others, or what loving others means, which is to love your enemies. That is a very different concept of what the world has today. He says to love your enemies. He says to do good to those who hate you. He says to bless those who curse you. He says to pray for those who revile you and mistreat you and oppress you and persecute you. He says to do all of those things, even though these people do not fit into your box. Even though the two of you are from two different affiliations, or social class, or economic class, or racial, or ethnic groups, or gender groups, whatever they are, Jesus says to look beyond all of that, and especially if they don't like you, especially if they hate you, especially if they would be called your enemy. He says to pray for them. He says to love them. He says to show mercy to them. Be merciful as your Father in heaven is merciful. Show mercy as the Good Samaritan showed love and mercy. If you have other question on today's topic or any other topic, feel free to post your questions here to YouTube just below this video, or you can send me an email, yourportablepastor@gmail.com, yourportablepastor@gmail.com. Remember our campaign for understanding and your smile photos, #YourSmileForEveryone at Portable Pastor. This is Dr. Kevin of the Portable Pastor LLC, blessing you with the spiritual fruit of kindness and love. And don't forget to like and share these videos. See you next time.